And welcome to my How to Do Well in a Law Class video. This is going to be very short, so I don't want to waste your time, but I'm going to go over how it is you should study for any law class, and especially this one that we're going to be involved with particularly. So listen up. It's very important that you understand this, because how we study for law classes is really a lot different than we would for other classes that you have experienced. And that's because in the law, you have to do two things in order to be able to get the right answer. First, you have to know the law, and that can be presented itself a problem. But then number two is you have to pick the law out that applies to a given situation, and then apply that law to the situation by first putting out the definition of the law, and then bringing in the facts that show that that law is satisfied as to its requirements, so that it can be used to resolve the situation. Without doing all of that, we really don't have a law class at all. For instance, we're not going to ask you the law of burglary specifically. Tell me exactly what the law of burglary is, for instance. But I may give you a fact situation where a burglary has occurred, or something like a burglary has occurred. And then I'm going to ask you what law would apply to this situation, and you'll find that the burglary statute does apply. And the reason why is because you pick out the burglary definition from your outline that I'm going to show you how to make. You're going to get the facts from the situation. You're going to show that each element or piece of the definition of a burglary is satisfied by the facts in the case, so we can call this a burglary. Therefore, the answer is that we have a burglary, and here's all the reasons why. So, in essence, the reason why you have to do this particular way of learning is that there are many legal concepts that you're going to be responsible for in this class and any law class. You'll have a few hundred in this class. Take a business law class, for instance. I sometimes have several hundred concepts that have to be known, and you have to have your finger on them in terms of that to be at your fingertips when you need them. And you can't go back to the book and review it when you're trying to do a test or do your work on a written assignment. So what you do in order to get a handle on all of these legal concepts is you simply outline the definition of each legal concept or each rule or each law that you're going to be responsible for, and you're going to list it out chapter by chapter through a single list of the definitions, the names and definitions of each legal concept, each law, and each rule that you're responsible for. Okay, and I'm going to show you how to do that here, at least for part of, a very small part of chapter 1, to give you an idea of what we do. And you'll see later when we get through with all the different points that we go through exactly why this works the way it does, okay? And so what you do, when in your reading, you're going to find these concepts, and they're going to be described, they're going to be explained, examples are going to be given, definitions, of course, will be there specifically for you. What you put in your outline is not the explanation, not the examples. You put in only the definition. You will already have understood the explanation. You will have understood the examples, and you'll understand the concept. The question is really just getting your hands on the definition of that concept when you need it. And so that's how we put this stuff together. Let's actually demonstrate this so you know what we're talking about. Let's first look at the first concept in chapter 1 that you're going to want to know, or at least know that you'll be responsible for, and that one is on it's page 6. I know there's lots of reading before that, and those things get you introduced into the subject matter. But the first one is this idea of what's called the CSI effect, and it talks about changes in popular culture brought about by rapid scientific and technological advances and widespread dissemination of information about them, meaning scientific methodologies, has heightened jurors' expectations and demands for scientific evidence in almost every respect. Some scholars and practitioners call this phenomena the CSI effect. You want to know that effect. That is something, that's a concept you want to know about. It's something you will be responsible for. It's bolded here so you know it's a term you're going to want to know what its definition is. Now, you see that we have lots of words there. We can, instead of putting it into those words and just copying those words down, which makes it difficult for us to understand and makes the whole process cumbersome, we're going to put this entirely into our own words, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our document. We're going to put down, first thing is a CSI effect. What is it? It's the increasing demand of jurors for scientific evidence in almost all aspects of criminal trials, whether or not such evidence is particularly valuable. Okay, that's it. Now you probably want to bold the CSIFF because that's a nice term that we want to get out there for us. Okay, so that's the first thing that's in any of the chapter 1 for you to be dealing with. Now let's go to the next concepts that we might be responsible for. And if you look at these first, they talk about an interdependent criminal justice system. They say police, courts, and corrections are separate government institutions with separate goals, histories, and operating procedures. Though separate, they are also tied together because they must interact with one another. Okay, that shows the concept that there is interdependency between the different components of the criminal justice system. All right, so we want to first put in the title, Interdependent Criminal Justice System. And I got to make sure I spell that correct. All right, and what does that mean? It means that in this case, we'd say things like police, courts, and corrections are all from separate government institutions, but also are tied together in an interdependency because they must interact with each other constantly. So now I'm restating this exactly the way interdependency. I'll get that right. There we go. And then we want to bold this section here because that's the concept that we are going to be defining. So we've now defined this concept of interdependency, right? Okay. Now if we go back, there's another concept right next to it, and that's the fragmentation or fragmented criminal justice system. They talk about from the perspective of what they call a non-system. That's where it doesn't work essentially as a system. What is most salient is the fragmentation. Police components consist of nearly 18,000 enforcement agencies with varying traditions of cooperation and antagonism. The correction component includes more than 1,820 state and federal correction facilities, to say nothing of the thousands of local jails. Okay, and it even goes even further on the next page. The fragmentation within the three components of the non-system of criminal justice is compounded by the decentralization of government. Okay, so what we want to do, put down here, is fragmentation of the criminal justice system. There are many police agencies, correction agencies, courts, and other related institutions that are in a, quote, non-system, a non-functional system, in that, what are the reasons? They all have different, in this case it's different traditions, policies, goals, abilities to cooperate, and antagonism for other agencies. This non-functional aspect and in this case we're dealing with is compounded by the decentralization of government. What this means is that government we have federal, state, and local government. Each of them have their own systems, policies, traditions, abilities to cooperate, antagonism, and so on. And so we may have a police agency, we may have a state police agency that's different than a local agency, and they both may conflict. They may be in conflict with different correctional agencies. All of those may be in conflict or have different goals, policies, and other things as to courts and so on. So now we've got this, we've got essentially now, let's see, 10 pages for the first chapter we have in 3 very short paragraphs, all of which are no more than 2 sentences each. And there you go. You keep doing this through the entire book. Now, you see how what I was doing here is I was highlighting the stuff that we want to be sure is in our outline in some form, but I didn't take this whole sentence here and put it in there. I put this non-functional aspect is compounded by decentralization of government. We know that already. We know what that means because we've read all this explanation here. We've seen all the examples. We understand what that means now. We don't need to go through and put in all that extra information because we want to be able to go down each of these different concepts as we're looking for a certain law to, let's say, answer a quiz question and get it right. We may have to go in here and look to see what law we have, and we have to have it at our fingertips, right, and go down this checklist. So your outline becomes your checklist. So if you do this for every chapter, every week, what will happen is when you're reading your chapters, it'll probably take you about 150% of the time to read your chapter as you would to simply read it and not create the outline. However, what will end up happening is you will save considerable time in the long run because you don't have to go back and reread your chapter, at least not likely. And the only time you may need to go back to the book for a quiz, for instance, is maybe there's a case with a holding that you forgot to put into your outline. And you have to go back and look up the case and see what it held in order to answer a question, perhaps, something of that sort. So you might miss one of these things, and that's about it. Now, and another way you want to check your work on these outlines is to go to the PowerPoint that you see for every week and make sure that every concept that is in the PowerPoint is also a concept that you have in your outline. Okay? If you do that, I can promise you, and I mean promise you, you will do well in my class. If you do this for every single chapter, you will have first a commanding knowledge of what you need to know. This will become something that's ingrained in your long-term memory. So it'll be something you know way beyond the end of this class and into your professional life. And you will benefit greatly from it if you do this. And the reason why we know that this works is because when we take concepts, we put them into our own words, and we either write them out on a piece of paper or we type them out on a computer screen. For some reason, we don't know why, but it goes into our long-term memory and it just stays there. Okay, so often you may not even need your outline. And as one example of this that'll help you to understand this, if anyone has ever made up a shopping list and then gone to the store and found out that you forgot your shopping list, I'll make you bet that you will know that you were able to remember at least 90% of what was on that list. And the reason why is because you wrote it down on the paper. Had you not written it down on the paper, you would never have remembered it, at least not very much of it. Okay, that's what this effect is. All right. Okay, so this is what you need to know. If you follow this, everything is going to work out very well for you in this class. If you don't, it'll just mean that you're going to be struggling to do well in the class because there's so many concepts that you will be responsible for, and you need to be able to get your hands on it as soon as you can and as easily as you can. All right. So again, if you have any questions, or you have any problems with this, or you want more explanation of how to do this, or you want me to look at one of your outlines and critique it for you, please feel free to email, text, or call me, and I'd be more than glad to help.